The smell of his cologne, sandalwood and something sharp, like ambition, used to make my stomach flutter. Now it just made me nauseous. I'm Lorraine, and for 8 years I watched that scent walk through our Baltimore townhouse door every evening at exactly 6:47 p.m., carrying with it the weight of another day I'd apparently failed to meet his standards. The click of his briefcase on the marble entryway table became my Pavlovian bell for anxiety, but Marcus never knew that behind my carefully practiced smile, behind the perfectly plated dinners and the way I'd learned to make myself small in doorways, I was taking notes. Mental notes. The kind that would eventually become his undoing. It started small, the way poison always does. A comment about how I'd folded the towels wrong. A sigh when I spoke too long about my day at the community center where I worked with at-risk youth. "That's nice, Lorraine," he'd say, eyes never leaving his phone. And I'd feel myself shrinking, molecule by molecule, until I wondered if I'd disappear entirely. His sister Shanice warned me once, early on, that Marcus had a way of making people feel like supporting characters in his story. I'd laughed it off then, drunk on new love and the way he'd pursued me with such intensity. I didn't understand that intensity was just control, wearing a prettier mask. The night everything changed, rain hammered against our bedroom window with the rhythm of a racing heart. Marcus sat at his home desk, the blue light from his laptop casting shadows that made his features look carved from stone. I brought him chamomile tea. He never drank it. But I always made it, this sad ritual of care that went unacknowledged. As I set the cup down, I glimpsed his screen. An email chain. My eyes caught fragments. Adjust the compliance reports. Peterson doesn't need to know about the discrepancy. Just backdate the approvals. My hand trembled slightly, tea sloshing in the cup. Marcus slammed the laptop shut so fast I jumped. "Do you mind?" His voice was ice. "Some of us have actual important work to do." I apologized. I always apologized. But as I walked back down the hallway, my reflection caught in the gilded mirror his mother had given us. A mirror I'd always hated because it showed me too clearly. I saw something different in my eyes, a spark, a question. What exactly was Marcus hiding? That night, I couldn't sleep. Beside me, Marcus snored softly, peaceful in his certainty that I was harmless, controllable. I stared at the ceiling, counting the hairline cracks in the plaster I'd memorized over countless sleepless nights, and I made a decision. Not a loud one, not a dramatic one, just a quiet shift in my center of gravity, like the moment before an earthquake when the animals sense it first and go still. I'd spent 8 years learning Marcus, learning his patterns, his tells, his weaknesses disguised as strengths. He worked as a senior compliance officer at Meridian Financial Solutions, a mid-sized investment firm downtown. The irony wasn't lost on me even then. A man who policed others' ethical violations while conducting his own symphony of misconduct. He often bragged about his position, how he was the gatekeeper of integrity, how people feared him. He wore that fear like a medal. But fear is a funny thing. It can make you powerful or it can make you sloppy. Marcus had become sloppy. Now I want to pause here for just a moment. If you're listening to this from your home, your car, wherever life has you right now, I want you to know how much it means to me that you're here. Truly. Sometimes when we're going through the hardest moments of our lives, we feel invisible, unheard. So thank you for hearing me. Your time is precious and you're spending it with me, and that's not something I take lightly. The next morning, I watched Marcus prepare for work with fresh eyes. He spent 23 minutes in the bathroom. I'd never counted before. His navy suit, custom tailored from that place on Charles Street, hung perfectly on his frame. He checked himself in the mirror 3 times, adjusting his tie with the precision of a man going to war. At breakfast, he scrolled through his phone, a slight frown creasing his forehead. "Problem?" I asked, keeping my voice light. Curious, but not too curious. Jenkins is asking questions about the Thorpe account again. Man doesn't know when to let things go. He bit into his toast with more force than necessary. "Jenkins?" I filed the name away. "I'm sure you'll handle it," I said, refilling his coffee. "You always do." He smiled then, that patronizing curve of lips that used to make me feel cherished, and now just felt like a pat on the head. "That's right. I always do." After he left, the house settled into its familiar silence. I stood in the kitchen, morning light streaming through the window over the sink, illuminating the coffee ring Marcus had left on the counter. I didn't wipe it up right away. Instead, I sat down at my own laptop, an older model Marcus had given me when he upgraded, because you don't need anything fancy for Facebook and recipes, and I began to research. Meridian Financial Solutions had a website, sleek and professional, full of words like integrity, transparency, and client-first values. There were photos of the executive team, including Marcus, looking stern and trustworthy in his headshot. I clicked through to their careers page, then to their policies section, and there it was, buried under several layers of corporate language, the ethics hotline and internal reporting system. Meridian is committed to maintaining the highest ethical standards. Employees and stakeholders are encouraged to report concerns through our confidential reporting system. All reports are investigated thoroughly by our independent ethics committee. Retaliation against whistleblowers is strictly prohibited and will result in immediate termination. I read it 3 times. Then I read the submission guidelines. Reports could be made anonymously. They required specific details: dates, names, nature of violations. They promised protection for reporters. The irony burned in my chest like good whiskey. Marcus's own company had built the weapon I would use against him. But I needed ammunition first. I needed proof. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a shadow in my own home. I learned Marcus's laptop password by watching his fingers, memorizing the pattern like a dance. Capital M, his birth year, Shanice's birthday, because he was predictable in his sentimentality about family, and a $sign. M 1982 Shao $95. It took me 4 tries across 4 days to get it right, always when he was in the shower, always with my heart hammering so hard I thought he'd hear it through the walls. His email was a goldmine of corruption. It wasn't just one thing, it was a pattern, a tapestry of small violations that together painted a picture of systematic fraud. He'd been altering compliance reports for clients, backdating approvals to cover up missed deadlines, accepting gifts that clearly violated company policy. I found an email from a client thanking him for helping expedite their approval with a reminder that the golf trip to Scotland is all booked for next month. Looking forward to it. I documented everything. I created a separate email account, not under my name, not traceable to our home IP, because I did it from the library downtown where I'd told Marcus I was volunteering extra hours. I took screenshots, noting dates and times. I cross-referenced company policies, highlighting where each violation fell. I was meticulous, patient. I'd learned patience from Marcus himself, from all those years of waiting for him to notice me, to value me, to love me the way I'd once loved him. But something else was happening too. As I compiled this evidence, as I built my case like a prosecutor preparing for trial, I felt myself coming back into focus. The woman in that gilded mirror started to look more solid, more real. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have purpose beyond managing Marcus's moods and maintaining his comfortable life. One evening, about 3 weeks into my investigation, Marcus came home agitated. He poured himself scotch, the expensive kind he kept in the crystal decanter, and loosened his tie with jerky movements. "Rough day?" I asked from the kitchen, where I was preparing his favorite meal, jerk chicken with rice and peas, my grandmother's recipe. "Corporate's doing a routine audit next month. Jenkins has been running his mouth, and now they're sending someone from the main office to review our department." He downed the scotch in one gulp, poured another. "Nothing I can't handle, but it's annoying, like I don't have enough to deal with." My hands stilled on the cutting board. An audit. That changed things. I had a timeline now. "I'm sure everything's fine," I said, my voice steady even as my mind raced. "You run a tight ship." "Damn right I do." He came up behind me, and for a moment I thought he might touch me, might offer some gesture of affection. Instead, he reached around me to grab a piece of pineapple from the cutting board. "What would you know about it anyway? It's not like you understand the first thing about corporate finance." The casual cruelty was so familiar, it barely registered anymore. But underneath, that spark I'd felt weeks ago glowed hotter. "You're right," I said. "I wouldn't understand." He smiled, satisfied, and walked away. That night, after he fell asleep, I finalized my report. Every violation, every piece of evidence, every policy breached. I cross-referenced it with the company's code of conduct, which I'd downloaded and studied like scripture. I wrote it in calm, professional language, not emotional, not vindictive, just facts, dates, documentation. The truth laid out like a medical examiner's report. Before I could second-guess myself, before fear could crawl back into my throat and make a home there, I submitted it through the ethics hotline portal. The confirmation screen glowed in the darkness of my tiny home office, the room Marcus called my hobby space, because he couldn't imagine I did anything serious in there. "Your report has been received and assigned case number ET2847. You will receive updates at the email address provided. Thank you for your commitment to ethical business practices." I closed the laptop. My hands weren't shaking. Outside, the city hummed with its nighttime symphony. Distant sirens, the rumble of late buses, someone's car alarm going off 3 blocks over. I felt strangely calm, like I'd just set down a heavy weight I'd been carrying so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Now, if you're enjoying this story, if it's resonating with something in your own life, or you just appreciate hearing about people finding their strength in dark places, I'd be grateful if you take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. These stories matter because they remind us we're not alone in our struggles. They matter because sometimes we need to hear how others found their way through before we can find our own path. So, if this is speaking to you, let me know. Your support keeps these stories coming. The next few days were strange. I moved through my routine with Marcus like an actress who'd played the same role for so long she could do it in her sleep. But internally, I was electric with anticipation and terror in equal measure. What had I done? What would happen? Part of me, the part that had been trained over 8 years to doubt myself, wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe the violations weren't as serious as I thought. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe. But then Marcus would make some cutting comment about my weight or ignore me entirely for hours while he scrolled through his phone, or criticize the way I'd organized the linen closet, and I'd remember. I'd remember all the times he'd made me feel worthless, all the times he'd dismissed my work at the community center as playing around with kids, all the times he'd told me, in 1,000 subtle ways, that I was lucky he tolerated me. On the 4th day after I submitted the report, Marcus received a phone call. I was in the garden, my sanctuary, the one place he never bothered me because he found it boring, planting late-season herbs. Through the open kitchen window, I heard his voice rise. "What do you mean there's been a complaint?" "What kind of complaint? That's ridiculous. Who filed it?" Silence as he listened. An external investigation? That's completely unnecessary. I can explain any concerns internally. My record speaks for itself. More silence. I kept my hands in the soil, grounding myself, focusing on the smell of earth and rosemary. Fine. Yes, I'll cooperate fully. This is obviously some kind of misunderstanding, or frankly, someone with an axe to grind. You know how it is. Successful people make enemies. When he came outside, his face was a storm system. Someone filed a complaint against me with the ethics committee. Can you believe it? After everything I've done for that company. What kind of complaint? I asked, brushing dirt from my hands, the picture of concerned innocence. They won't tell me the details yet. Corporate policy. They have to investigate first before discussing specifics with the accused. The accused. Like I'm some kind of criminal. He paced the small brick patio, his expensive shoes clicking rhythmically. It's probably Jenkins. Has to be. He's been jealous ever since I got promoted over him. When will you know more? They're sending an investigator next week. I have to provide access to all my files, my correspondence, my approvals from the last 3 years. He stopped pacing, looked at me. Really looked at me, maybe for the first time in months. This could be serious, Lorraine. If someone's making false accusations, it could damage my reputation, even if I'm cleared. For just a moment, I felt something like guilt flicker through me. This was the man I'd once loved, the man I'd built a life with. But then I remembered the email I'd found just yesterday, one I hadn't even included in my report because I'd already submitted it. Marcus calling me the ball and chain in a message to a colleague, joking about how I was good for cooking and keeping the house clean, not much else. I'm sure the truth will come out, I said. It always does. He studied me for a long moment, and for a heartbeat, I wondered if somehow he knew, if he could see the steel that had grown in my spine. But then he just shook his head. You're right. Truth always wins. I just hate the inconvenience of having to prove myself to people who should already know my character. He went back inside. I stayed in the garden until the sun began to set, painting the Baltimore sky in shades of amber and rose. A text chimed on. My phone. The secure email app I'd set up for communications about the case. The message was brief. Investigation initiated. Preliminary review confirms sufficient cause for full inquiry. Estimated timeline, 2 to 3 weeks. Thank you for your detailed submission. I deleted the message and put my phone away. The evening air was cooling, carrying the scent of Mrs. Patterson's jasmine from next door. I could hear children playing somewhere down the block, their laughter bright and uncomplicated. Life was continuing all around me, ordinary and extraordinary at once, and I was still here, still breathing, still moving forward. That night at dinner, Marcus barely ate. He pushed food around his plate, his mind clearly elsewhere, running through scenarios and defenses. I watched him with something like anthropological curiosity. Who was this man, really? Had he always been this person? Or had he become this overtime power and arrogance, calcifying into cruelty? Marcus, I said, surprising myself with my own voice cutting through the silence. He looked up, startled. I rarely initiated conversation anymore. Yes? Do you think people can change, like fundamentally change who they are? His eyebrows drew together. Where's this coming from? I was just talking to one of the kids at the center. He's been in trouble, but he's really trying to turn things around. Got me thinking about transformation, I guess. About whether people can really evolve. Marcus leaned back in his chair, and I could see him shifting into lecture mode, the tone he used when he wanted to educate me on how the world really worked. Honestly, I think people are who they are. They might change their behavior temporarily, but their core nature, that stays the same. It's why I'm good at my job. I can read people, see through the act to who they really are underneath. And who am I? The question came out before I could stop it. Underneath? He seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. You're Lorraine. You're sweet, simple. You like your garden and your community center kids. You're not complicated. He said it like it was a compliment. Simple, not complicated. It was like being called a piece of furniture. Pleasant enough, functional, easily overlooked. Right, I said. Not complicated. That night I lay awake again, but this time not from anxiety. I was planning. The investigation would take 2 to 3 weeks. During that time, I needed to be the perfect version of what Marcus expected. Supportive, uncomplicated, simple Lorraine. I couldn't give him any reason to suspect me, not now when everything was in motion. The investigator arrived on a Tuesday. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by much. Marcus had been a wreck all morning, changing ties 3 times, rehearsing his explanations to me over breakfast, even though I hadn't asked. Just be yourself, I told him. Tell the truth. He kissed my forehead absently, his mind already at the office. Simple advice for a complicated situation, but thanks, baby. Baby. He only called me that when he wanted something, or when he was stressed and reverted to automatic endearments. The days that followed had a surreal quality. Marcus would come home exhausted, tight-lipped about the investigation. He'd been instructed not to discuss details with anyone, including me, which suited me perfectly. But I could see it eating at him. The lack of control, the scrutiny, the way his armor of arrogance was developing cracks. 1 week in, he had a meltdown. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when he came in, poured himself into the chair by the window, and just broke. Not crying. Marcus didn't cry, but something close to it. A crumbling. They have emails, he said, voice hollow. Emails I thought were private. They're questioning every decision I've made for the past 3 years. Patricia, the investigator, she's like a damn robot. No emotion, just facts, facts, facts. She asked me about the Scotland trip. How did she even know about that? I continued folding, keeping my movement steady. Maybe someone else told them? But who? And why? What did I do to deserve this? He looked at me then, and for the first time I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Genuine fear. Lorraine, if this goes badly, I could lose my job, my reputation, everything I've built. Part of me, a small, dying part that still remembered loving him, wanted to comfort him, to go to him and say it would be okay. But I thought about the Scotland trip, about the client he'd fast-tracked through approvals in exchange for luxury vacation. I thought about all the other clients whose cases he'd manipulated, whose trust he'd violated. I thought about his own violation of me, day after day, year after year, the casual erosion of my sense of self-worth. Did you do the things they're investigating? I asked quietly. The question hung between us like smoke. It's not that simple, he said finally. You don't understand how business works. Sometimes you have to be flexible with the rules to get things done. Everyone does it. I just got caught. So you did do them. Lorraine, don't. He stood abruptly. You know what? I don't need judgment from you right now. I need support. Can you do that? Can you just be supportive instead of asking stupid questions? There it was. The Marcus I knew. Fear had pulled back the curtain for a moment, but the show must go on. Of course, I said. I'm sorry. I'm here for you. He nodded, mollified, and left the room. I finished folding the laundry with mechanical precision. Then I went to my office, closed the door, and allowed myself one moment of shaking, of feeling the weight of what I'd set in motion. Then I breathed, steadied myself, and checked my secure email. Investigation proceeding as scheduled. Multiple violations confirmed. Will proceed to disciplinary. Hearing. Estimated completion. 1 week. 1 week. 7 days until Marcus's carefully constructed world came down around him. Those 7 days were the longest of my life. Marcus alternated between manic confidence, they have nothing that will stick, just circumstantial stuff, and spiraling anxiety. He wasn't sleeping well. I could hear him pacing at night, and sometimes I'd find him staring at his laptop at 3 a.m., reviewing documents, building his defense. I maintained my routine with almost meditative focus. Garden, community center, grocery shopping, dinner preparation, the rhythms of the life I'd built around Marcus's needs. But internally, I was counting down, and I was preparing. I'd started apartment hunting, quietly. I had some money saved. Not much, but enough for a security deposit and first month's rent. My job at the community center didn't pay well, but it was steady, and they'd offered me more hours if I wanted them. I'd always said no because Marcus preferred me home. But that was going to change. I packed a go bag and hid it in my car trunk, important documents, some clothes, toiletries, my grandmother's jewelry. Just in case. Just in case Marcus figured it out. Just in case his collapse turned violent. I didn't think it would, he'd never been physically abusive, but I'd also never backed him into a corner before. Now, I want to ask you something. If you've experienced anything like this, being underestimated, being made to feel small, being with someone who couldn't see your strength, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. Not just for me, but for everyone else listening who might be going through something similar. Sometimes knowing we're not alone is the difference between staying stuck and finding the courage to move forward. So share your story. Let's build something here together. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for a Thursday. Marcus wore his best suit, the charcoal gray one that cost more than my car payment. He'd been up since 5, rehearsing his statement. I made him breakfast, eggs and turkey bacon, fresh orange juice. He didn't eat much. "This is it," he said, adjusting his cufflinks for the 3rd time. "After today, this nightmare will be over and I can start finding out who did this to me." "How will you find out?" I asked, pouring coffee I knew he wouldn't drink. "Someone filed that initial complaint. Once I'm cleared, I'm requesting an investigation into who made false allegations. They'll have left a trail. Everyone leaves a trail." He looked at me, and there was something predatory in his expression. "And when I find them, I'll make sure they regret it." My hand didn't shake as I set down the coffee pot. "What if you're not cleared?" The question seemed to genuinely confuse him. "What?" "What if they find that you did violate policies? What happens then?" He laughed, sharp and bitter. "You really don't have faith in me, do you? My own wife thinks I'm guilty." I didn't say that. I just want to be prepared for all possibilities. "The possibility is that I'm cleared, Lorraine. That's the only possibility, because I'm good at my job and I've made that company millions of dollars, and they know it." He grabbed his briefcase. "I'll be home late." "Don't wait up." After he left, I sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching dust motes in its beam, making them dance like tiny spirits. The house felt different somehow, like it was holding its breath. I went to work at the community center. Shayla, one of the teenagers I mentored, was there working on college applications. She was brilliant, headed for Howard University on a full scholarship, and she reminded me of who I might have been if I'd believed in myself more at her age. "Miss Lorraine, you okay?" she asked, looking up from her laptop. "You seem distracted." "Just thinking about choices," I said. "About how one decision can change everything." "That's deep for a Thursday morning." She grinned. "But true. My mom always says every choice is a door. You walk through it and you can't go back, only forward to the next door." "Wise woman?" Her mother? Every choice is a door. I'd walked through mine weeks ago when I submitted that report. Now I was just waiting to see what room I'd entered. My phone rang at 2:47 p.m. Marcus. I almost didn't answer, but something, curiosity maybe, or the need to know, made me pick up. Lorraine. His voice was strange, hollow, disbelieving. What happened? They terminated me, effective immediately. Violations of ethics policy, breach of fiduciary duty, acceptance of improper gifts. They had everything. Years of everything. He sounded like he was underwater, words distorted by shock. How did they have everything? I stepped outside into the small courtyard behind the center, away from curious ears. I'm sorry, Marcus, that's terrible. Someone gave them everything. Every email, every transaction, dates, times, cross-referenced with company policy. It was like someone who knew me had been watching, documenting. Patricia said she'd never seen such a comprehensive whistleblower report. My heart was hammering, but my voice stayed calm. Years of practice. Who would do that? I don't know, but they were close to me, had access to my correspondence, my schedule. It could have been anyone at the office, but he trailed off, and in that silence, I could hear him thinking, calculating. I need to come home. We need to talk. Okay, I said. I'll be here. I hung up and stood there, breathing carefully, watching a robin hop across the grass searching for worms. This was it. The moment of truth. Marcus was coming home and he was starting to piece things together. I had maybe an hour before he arrived. I called my supervisor, told her I had a family emergency and needed to leave early. Then I drove home, the whole time running through scenarios in my head. What if he figured it out? What if he became violent? What if? What if? What if? But underneath the fear was something stronger. Relief. It was almost over. When I pulled into our driveway, Marcus's car was already there. He'd driven fast then. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering myself, and then I walked into the house I'd shared with him for 8 years. He was in the living room, still in his suit but with his tie loosened, a glass of scotch in his hand. Not his first, from the looks of it. "Hi," I said, setting down my purse. He looked at me, and I saw the moment it happened, the moment the pieces clicked into place in his mind. His expression shifted from shock to confusion to dawning realization. It was you. Not a question. A statement. I didn't deny it. After all this time, all this pretending, I was so tired of lying. Yes. He stood, and I tensed, ready to run if I needed to. But he just stood there, swaying slightly. You? You did this to me. You don't even understand what I do. You're... Simple, I supplied. Not complicated? How? His voice cracked. How did you even know how to... You left your laptop open once. I learned your password. After that, it was easy. You never thought to hide anything from me because you never thought I was paying attention. You never thought I was smart enough to understand what I was seeing. I kept my voice level, stating facts. But I am smart, Marcus. I'm actually very smart. I have a master's degree in social work that you've never once asked about. I work with legal systems and documentation every day at the center. I know how to build a case. I just never had a reason to use those skills against you before. This will destroy me. He said it like a child, bewildered. My career, my reputation, like you destroyed me. The words came out sharper than I intended. Every day for years, Marcus. Every little comment, every dismissal, every time you made me feel worthless. Did you think that didn't have a cost? So this is what? Revenge? You ruined my life because I hurt your feelings? No, I said, and I felt suddenly very calm, very clear. I ruined your life because you were breaking the law and violating the trust of your clients and your company. The fact that you also spent years emotionally abusing me just made me less sympathetic to your situation. But Marcus, you did this to yourself. I just documented it." He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe the real me had been invisible to him all along. "What happens now?" he asked finally. "Now? Now you deal with the consequences of your choices, and I'm going to file for divorce. I've already consulted a lawyer. Did that 2 weeks ago, actually. Maryland is a no-fault state, so it should be straightforward. I don't want anything from you except my freedom." "You've been planning this." The realization seemed to hit him in waves. "All of it. While I was, while you were, while I was cooking your dinners and planting gardens and being the simple, supportive wife you thought you married." "Yes." "I was planning." I picked up my purse. "I'm staying at a friend's tonight. I'll be back tomorrow to get more of my things. I suggest you use this time to think about what comes next for you." "Lorraine." But I was already walking to the door. My hands were steady. My breath was even. I felt, for the first time in years, like I was taking up the right amount of space in the world. "One more thing," I said, pausing in the doorway. "Jenkins didn't file that complaint. Neither did any of your colleagues. It was me, just me. The person you thought knew nothing about your world understood nothing about your work. Remember that." I walked out into the evening air. The sun was setting again, painting everything in gold and shadow. I got in my car, drove to the extended stay hotel I'd booked that morning, and when I finally closed the door to that anonymous, clean room, I sat on the edge of the bed and cried. Not sad tears, relieved tears, free tears. The next weeks were a blur of logistics, divorce papers, apartment hunting, moving my things while Marcus was out job hunting, a process that wasn't going well for him, from what I heard through Shanice, who'd called me in tears, torn between her brother and her friend. The ethics committee investigation had become public record, and in Marcus's industry, that kind of stain didn't wash out easily. I should have felt guilty. Maybe I would have, if he'd shown any remorse, any understanding of what he'd done wrong, but instead, he'd started a campaign of telling everyone who would listen that I'd betrayed him, ruined him out of spite. That the complaints were exaggerated, that everyone in his position bent rules, that I was vindictive and unstable. His narrative didn't stick. Too many people had their own Marcus stories. Colleagues who'd worked with him spoke up, off the record, about his arrogance and corner-cutting. Clients whose cases he'd mishandled came forward. The truth, it turned out, had a weight that Marcus's spin couldn't overcome. 3 months after that Thursday hearing, I stood in my new apartment, a small one-bedroom in a renovated building in Station North, an arts district full of murals and coffee shops and life, and looked around at the space I'd created. My furniture, my choices, my books on the shelves, my plants in the windows, my schedule on the wall. The community center had given me that full-time position with benefits. I was developing a new program for teens aging out of foster care, helping them navigate systems and advocate for themselves, teaching them essentially what I'd learned, that understanding the rules, the systems, the structures that govern our lives isn't just about compliance. It's about power. It's about knowing how to protect yourself and fight back when necessary. Shayla had been accepted to Howard. On her last day at the center before leaving for college, she'd hugged me and whispered, "I don't know what happened with you and your ex, Miss Lorraine, but you're different now, stronger. It's inspiring." I'd hugged her back and told her to trust herself, to never let anyone make her feel small. That night in my new apartment, I cooked dinner for myself, nothing fancy, just pasta with vegetables from the farmer's market, and I ate it slowly, tasting every bite present in my own life in a way I hadn't been in years. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You destroyed my life. I hope you're happy." Marcus. I stared at the message for a long moment, then I blocked the number and deleted the text. He still didn't understand. This wasn't about destroying him. It was about saving myself. Those are two very different things. The truth is, I probably could have left Marcus without turning him in. I could have just filed for divorce and walked away. But that wouldn't have been justice, not really. He would have continued his practices, continued hurting clients, continued believing he was untouchable. And on some level, he would have seen my leaving as proof that I was weak, that I'd run away. Instead, I'd used his own systems against him. The company's ethics policy that he'd sworn to uphold, the reporting mechanisms they'd created, the values they'd claimed to hold. I'd simply taken them at their word and held Marcus accountable to the standards he'd agreed to follow. There's poetry in that, I think, in using someone's own rules to bring them to justice. Sometimes I still smell that sandalwood cologne in random places, the grocery store, the subway, and my stomach still clenches for a moment. Trauma has a long memory, but then I remember, I'm not that woman anymore. I'm not the one folding towels wrong or speaking too long about my day or shrinking in doorways. I'm Lorraine, and I built a case, executed a plan, and reclaimed my life using nothing but attention, intelligence, and the truth. That's something no one can take away from me. So if you've made it this far in my story, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening, for bearing witness, for letting me share this chapter of my life. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that you're stronger than you think, or if you just appreciate hearing about someone finding their way through the darkness into the light, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. These stories matter. Your story matters. And by supporting this space, you're helping create a community where people can share their truths without shame, where we can learn from each other's courage. 6 months after leaving Marcus, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop in Station North, a place called the Daily Grind with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, when I saw Patricia Chen walk in, the investigator. She was in line ahead of me, ordering what sounded like a very complicated latte, and when she turned around, our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled slightly and walked over. Lorraine, right? Marcus Whitfield's ex-wife? That's right. My heart was beating faster, though I wasn't sure why. She couldn't do anything to me. I'd done nothing illegal. I thought so. I'm Patricia Chen. We never formally met, but I know who you are. She gestured to the empty chair at my table. May I? I nodded, curious despite myself. She sat, carefully arranging her coffee and her briefcase. Up close, I could see she was probably in her late 40s, with laugh lines around her eyes that suggested she smiled more than her professional demeanor indicated. I wanted to thank you, she said simply. For what? For the report you filed. Don't look so surprised. I've been doing this for 15 years. I can always tell the difference between a colleague with an axe to grind and someone with intimate knowledge and genuine concern. Your report was meticulous, detailed, personal without being emotional. It was clear you knew the subject well. I wrapped my hands around my own coffee cup, feeling its warmth. He was breaking the rules. Someone needed to say something. Many people knew what he was doing. You were the only one who said something. She took a sip of her complicated latte. In my line of work, I see a lot of whistleblowers. Most of them are trying to take someone down. But your report, it was different. It felt like you were trying to set something right. There's a distinction there. I was trying to set myself free, I said, honestly. The fact that it also held him accountable was just aligned incentives. Patricia laughed, genuine and warm. Aligned incentives? I like that. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a business card. I don't usually do this, but if you ever need a reference for a job or anything else, please use my name. What you did took courage. The world needs more people willing to speak up when they see something wrong, even when it costs them something personally. I took the card, throat tight with unexpected emotion. Thank you. No, she said, standing to leave. Thank you. Marcus Whitfield had been on my radar for a while, but we never had enough to move forward. Your report gave us what we needed. And for what it's worth, in my investigation, I spoke to a lot of people who worked with him. The picture that emerged wasn't just of a man who cut corners professionally. Several colleagues mentioned his treatment of you at company events, how dismissive he was, how he talked about you. Really? Really? So when you say you were setting yourself free, I believe you. And I'm glad you did. She picked up her coffee. Take care of yourself, Lorraine. After she left, I sat there for a long time, watching the steam rise from my cup, watching people come and go through the coffee shop door, each one carrying their own stories, their own struggles, their own small victories. I thought about how we never really know what impact our actions might have, how speaking one truth can ripple outward in ways we can't predict. The divorce was finalized 4 months after that coffee shop encounter. Marcus didn't contest it. He was too busy trying to rebuild his career, taking a position at a much smaller firm for half his previous salary. I heard through Shanice that he'd started therapy, that he was working on himself. I hoped that was true, for his sake, but it wasn't my responsibility anymore. I'd started dating someone new, though I was taking it very slowly. Her name was Simone, and she was an artist who taught at the Maryland Institute College of Art. She made sculptures out of reclaimed materials, broken things, given new purpose and beauty. The metaphor wasn't lost on either of us. On our third date, as we walked through Patterson Park watching dogs play and children shriek with joy on the playground, she asked me about my marriage. Only if you want to talk about it, she added quickly. I don't want to pry. It's okay, I said, and I realized it was true. It didn't hurt to talk about anymore. I was married to someone who made me feel invisible. And then I became visible in a way he never expected. And it ended his career. Did he deserve it? She asked. Not judgmentally, just curious. Yes, I said without hesitation. He was breaking laws and betraying people's trust. But more than that, I think I deserved to not live that way anymore, to not be dismissed and diminished every single day. So even if what I did seems extreme to some people, it was necessary for me. Simone nodded thoughtfully. My ex used to tell me my art was a waste of time, that I should get a real job. Took me 2 years after we broke up to be able to create anything again. I understand what it's like to have someone try to erase you, bit by bit. How did you come back from it? I asked. I made a sculpture of her face, Simone said with a mischievous smile. And then I smashed it with a hammer and used the pieces to make something beautiful. Sometimes you have to destroy something to build what comes next. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, and I thought about that. About destruction and creation. About how my marriage had to shatter completely before I could begin to rebuild myself. About how Marcus's career had to end before he could, maybe, become someone better. A year after leaving Marcus, almost to the day, I was invited to speak on a panel at a social work conference. The topic was empowering clients through system navigation. I almost said no. Public speaking terrified me, and Marcus's voice still echoed sometimes in my head, telling me I had nothing important to say. But then I thought about Shayla, now thriving at Howard, sending me excited texts about her classes and her new friends. I thought about the other kids at the center, the ones who needed to know that understanding systems and rules wasn't boring or irrelevant. It was power. It was protection. So I said yes. Standing in front of 200 social workers and counselors, my hands only shaking a little, I told a version of my story. Not all the details, some things stay private, but the core truth. That I had used the systems designed to protect people to actually protect people, including myself. That knowledge is power, but only if we have the courage to use it. We teach our clients to advocate for themselves, I said, looking out at the sea of faces. But we also need to model that advocacy. We need to show them that understanding the rules, the policies, the bureaucratic structures that govern our lives isn't just about compliance. It's about knowing when and how to make those systems work for justice instead of against it. Afterward, 3 different women came up to me privately. Each one told me a version of the same story. They were in relationships where they felt diminished, trapped, unsure how to leave. They asked how I'd found the courage. I didn't find courage, I told them honestly. I found anger. Righteous anger. And I channeled it into something productive instead of something destructive. I didn't slash his tires or scream or make scenes. I documented, I researched, I used the tools available to me. And you can too. Whatever your situation is, there are systems in place. Legal systems, support systems, professional systems. Learn them. Use them. They're more powerful than you think. One woman, maybe in her 50s, with kind eyes and worry lines deep in her forehead, squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "I needed to hear this today." I never learned what happened to her, whether she left her situation or stayed, but I hoped she found her own path forward, whatever that looked like for her. That evening, back in my apartment with Simone cooking dinner in my tiny kitchen, our kitchen now, really, since she'd been spending most nights there, I felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Contentment. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of peace. The knowledge that I was living authentically, that the person I was in private matched the person I was in public. My phone rang. Shanice. "Hey, stranger," I answered. "How are you?" "I'm good. Listen, I wanted to tell you something. Marcus is engaged." I felt Simone glance at me from the kitchen, concern flickering across her face. I smiled at her, shook my head. "I'm okay." "That's fast," I said to Shanice. "Yeah, her name is Jennifer. She seems nice, actually. Very different from you. Works in his industry, really ambitious. I thought you should know in case you ran into them or something. Thanks for telling me. I hope he's happy." And I meant it, not because I'd forgiven him, that was a more complicated ongoing process, but because his happiness, or lack thereof, no longer had anything to do with me. "You're really okay?" Shanice asked, and I could hear the worry in her voice. She'd been caught in the middle of the divorce, loving both her brother and her friend, trying to be loyal to both. "I really am. Better than okay, actually. I'm good, Shanice. Really good." After we hung up, Simone brought over 2 plates of pasta primavera, and we ate on the couch, my feet in her lap, watching the sun set through my west-facing windows. "You really are okay with that?" she asked. "Him getting engaged?" "I am, because it's not my story anymore. Whatever happens between him and Jennifer, whether he's learned from his mistakes or whether he's going to repeat them, that's theirs to figure out. My story is here." I gestured around the apartment at the life I'd built. "This is mine." 2 years after submitting that ethics report, I was promoted to program director at the community center. My foster care transition program had been so successful that we'd received grants to expand it. I was hiring staff, developing curriculum, building something that would outlast me, something that mattered. I'd also started a blog about navigating systems, everything from healthcare bureaucracy to legal aid to corporate whistleblower protections. It had a small but dedicated following, And occasionally I'd get emails from people telling me that my posts had helped them advocate for themselves or a loved one in difficult situations. One email in particular stuck with me. It was from a woman named Teresa, who'd used my guide to reporting workplace discrimination to file a complaint against her supervisor. She'd been terrified of retaliation, but she'd documented everything, followed the procedures I'd outlined, and her complaint had been taken seriously. Her supervisor had been demoted, and Teresa had received a settlement and transfer to a different department. "I felt powerless for so long," she wrote. "But your blog helped me understand that the system isn't my enemy if I learn how to use it. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. You're changing lives." I cried when I read that, because that's what all of this had been for, really. Not revenge, though it had felt like that sometimes. Not even justice, though that had been part of it. It had been about reclaiming power, my own power, and helping others find theirs. Simone and I got married that fall in a small ceremony at the community center, surrounded by kids I'd mentored and colleagues who'd become family. Shanice came, though Marcus didn't. I hadn't expected him to, hadn't invited him. That chapter was closed. During our vows, I promised Simone that I would always be honest with her, always show her who I really was, and never make myself smaller to make her more comfortable. She promised me the same. We promised to build something together where both of us could be fully ourselves, fully visible. It was the opposite of everything my marriage to Marcus had been. And it was everything I needed. Now, 3 years after walking out of that house in Baltimore, I'm sitting in my home office. A real office now, in the row house. Simone and I bought together in Charles Village, writing this story. Outside, I can hear the sounds of the city. Buses, music from a neighbor's window, someone calling their dog. Inside, Simone is in her studio, the converted garage, working on a new sculpture series about transformation. I keep a photograph on my desk. It's from that day in the garden, the day Marcus got the phone call about the investigation. Someone, probably Simone during one of our early dates when I was showing her old photos, captured me with my hands in the soil and my face. My face looks peaceful, determined, like someone who knows exactly who she is and what she's capable of. I look at that photo sometimes when I'm doubting myself, when the old voices try to creep back in. You're not smart enough. You're too simple. Who do you think you are? And I answer back, I'm Lorraine. I'm someone who used knowledge as a weapon and rules as a shield. I'm someone who transformed her pain into purpose. I'm someone who learned that the systems designed to maintain order can also be used to create change, if you're brave enough to try. The truth is, I don't know if what I did was right by everyone's standards. Some people might say I should have just left, that turning Marcus in was vindictive. Others might say I didn't go far enough, that I should have pursued more consequences. But I've made peace with my choices, because I know this. I did what I needed to do to survive, to reclaim my dignity, and to stop someone from continuing to hurt others. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Not that revenge is sweet or that justice always prevails, but that we have more power than we think we do. The systems that seem designed to keep us powerless, they can be learned, understood, and used. The rules that seem to protect the powerful, they can also hold them accountable if someone is willing to enforce them. It took me 8 years to learn that. 8 years of being dismissed and diminished before I finally understood that the tools I needed were there all along. I just had to be willing to pick them up and use them. So if you're in a situation where you feel powerless, where someone is using their authority or your love or your fear to control you, I want you to know something. You're not powerless. You're not trapped. There are systems in place. Imperfect systems, yes, but systems nonetheless that can help you. Learn them. Document everything. Build your case with the same care you'd use to build anything precious and important. And when you're ready, when you've gathered your evidence and your courage, use those systems. Make them work for you. Hold people accountable not out of spite, but out of a commitment to truth and justice and your own dignity. That's what I did. And it changed everything. If this story has moved you, if it's given you something to think about or inspired you in any way, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment about your own experiences with finding your power, with standing up for yourself, with using the tools available to you to create change. These stories create community. They remind us that we're not alone in our struggles, that others have walked this path before us and found their way through. Your engagement, your likes, your subscribes, your comments, they tell me that these stories matter, that they're reaching people who need them. So thank you. Thank you for listening to my story, for being part of this community, for believing that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to write new chapters. I'm Lorraine, and this was how I used his company's rules to get my ultimate revenge. Or maybe, more accurately, how I used those rules to get my ultimate freedom. Because in the end, that's what it was really about. Not hurting him, though I won't pretend that didn't feel good, but freeing myself, reclaiming my life, becoming visible again, first to myself and then to the world. And if I can do it, if simple, not complicated Lorraine can learn systems and build cases and create change, then so can you. Whatever you're facing, whatever system seems designed to keep you down, you can learn it. You can use it. You can win. I believe in you, and I'm here, along with everyone else in this community, cheering you on. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, you're stronger than they think you are. You're stronger than you think you are. You just have to believe it, and then prove it.